The only people who don't want to disclose the truth are people with something to hide.
With Obama, we arguably have, and I know this sounds incendiary, but I think it's accurate, we arguably have our first red diaper baby president in the sense that he's raised here by mentors and influences who were very far to the left. I mean, Obama's mother, met Obama's father in a Russian language class at the University of Hawaii in the fall of 1960. I mean, they were studying the Russian language, and we know that the father, the Kenyan father, was very radical, very pro-communist. The mother, if she wasn't flat out a communist, was at least pro-communist. The grandfather was clearly on the far left. Frank Marshall Davis, the mentor, had been a Communist Party member. So you know, our current president is arguably a red diaper baby, and the product.
And let me just clarify. This phrase "red diaper baby" goes back to the 1940s and 50s, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm. It does, and it applies to a number of different people. That David Horowitz will tell you that he was raised that way, and it's a common term for individuals who were raised by communist left parents.
Mm-hmm. Now, Valerie Jarrett, how does she figure in all this? She is clearly Obama's closest confidant. How does this come to play?
Yeah, she is his right-hand woman. There's nobody closer. She said that her and Obama have a kind of mind melt going on. She's the one that lets Obama be Obama. I mean, they are really kindred souls, kindred spirits, two peas in a pod. And what's fascinating here, Mark, is that Valerie Jarrett, though she was born in Iran of all places, in the Middle East, and I believe it was November 1956. It was around the time of the Suez Crisis. But her family's roots are also in Chicago, and Valerie Jarrett's maternal grandfather, so this would be her mother's father, his name was Robert Taylor, and he was actually a Chicago leftist, African-American, and he rubbed shoulders and worked together with Frank Marshall Davis. Now, in addition to that, Valerie Jarrett's father-in-law, Vernon Jarrett, I mean, she marries into the name Jarrett. Vernon Jarrett also worked with Frank Marshall Davis in Chicago on various communist activities and projects and so forth, or at least communist-related, in the 1940s. So amazingly, these two both...
Well, let's slow down. So her father-in-law and her maternal grandfather... That's
right.
...were both acquainted with, if not more, this Frank Marshall Davis.
That's right. And the father, well, the grandfather, Robert Taylor, this is really very insidious. Robert Taylor, Valerie Jarrett's grandfather, and Frank Marshall Davis, Obama's mentor, both worked together with the group called the American Peace Mobilization, which was probably the worst, the most grotesque, the most insidious, notorious Communist Front organization in America in the 1940s. The American Peace Mobilization actually tried to keep America out of World War II, tried to keep America from stopping Hitler, because at that point Hitler was in an alliance with Stalin, and so they were doing Stalin's bidding. So this was a horrible Communist Front group that was perpetrating genuine evil, and both Frank Marshall Davis and Robert Taylor were part of that group.
Does it not amaze you, Professor, and I want to get into more of this, so you sit back and watch this, how the media in this country and how the Democrat kingpins in this country promoted Obama? I call him a media creation because that's what he is. And either didn't want to know any of this or would attack people who would even try to bring some aspects of it up. Doesn't this amaze you?
Yeah, in fact, that's what they do. With the reaction to my reporting of this in my books has been, one, either to compare me to Joe McCarthy and dismiss it and make fun of me, say this is witch hunting, modern-day McCarthyism, or flat out ignore it altogether. And in fact, that's what I found, Mark, generally, is that if they're ignoring you, you know you have your facts right? Because then they don't even want to go into it.
Oh, I get this with all my books, the New York Slimes, the Washington Compost, so they don't matter to me. Now, let me ask you this. So Valerie Jarrett and Obama, how do they meet up?
They met in, it would have been 80s or early 90s, just through Chicago politics, through Chicago political circles, legal circles, law firm. In fact, Valerie Jarrett knew Michelle Obama before they were married, before Michelle married Barack. She knew Michelle first and then was introduced to Barack Obama.
Did she help Michelle Obama get her job?
I believe she did. I reported on that before. I'd have to go back and take a look. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Now, also part of this sort of cabal was David Axelrod. And you mentioned the media creation of Barack Obama. Nobody had a greater role in that than David Axelrod. I mean, Axelrod came up with the whole hope and change message. He coined that phrase. He was the one that sort of found Obama in the 1990s, early 2000s, helped him run for office, helped him run for national office for the U.S. Senate. And David Axelrod, although he's originally from New York, and his mother, Merrill Bennett Axelrod, who, by the way, just passed away last week at the age of 93. But David Axelrod, when he went to Chicago to attend the University of Chicago, he ended up being taken in and influenced by the Cantor family. And you probably have to draw all this out to really connect all the dots. But the Cantor family were old pro-Soviet Marxist communists from the 1930s and 1940s. And it was specifically David Cantor who mentored David Axelrod. And there's no question about this. No one would dispute any of this. David Cantor clearly mentored David Axelrod, mentored him on media work, political consulting, helped Axelrod get his job at the Chicago Tribune. Well, the senior the senior Cantor, David's father, Harry Cantor, actually worked in Moscow in the 1930s for Stalin's government as a translator of Lenin's writings. Actually worked in Moscow. And after he spent several years working in Moscow for Stalin's government translating Lenin, I mean, this guy ran for governor of Massachusetts on the Communist Party ticket in the 1930s. And then he goes to Moscow. He works for Stalin's government translating Lenin. Then he comes back to Chicago, where there he meets Frank Marshall Davis, Barack Obama's mentor. And then eventually the Cantor family stays there, and they meet David Axelrod. So all of these folks, you've got Obama, Valerie Jarrett, and David Axelrod, all have these common political ancestors, literally out of Chicago's Communist Party USA circles in the 1930s and 1940s. You can't.
How did Axelrod meet Obama?
He met him, I believe, initially through the Harold Washington campaign and the work that Axelrod did.
All right, let me just tell you. Harold Washington became mayor of Chicago, and he really beat the Daley Machine to become mayor of Chicago. And he was quite the radical himself, wasn't he?
He was. And I've done an article on this for American Spectator, which you can find there online just by Googling my name. And I've done pieces that lay all this out. So if I don't get the facts right on this right now, you can check it out there. I did pieces on both David Axelrod and Valerie Jarrett. But they came into contact. Well, they started working together probably late 1990s, early 2000. And Axelrod saw in Obama a star, a Lincoln-esque figure, as Axelrod put it, as Axelrod saw it, and really an opportunity there to fundamentally transform America. And Axelrod came up with the phrases change and forward, which, by the way, are also phrases that I found in Frank Marshall Davis's writings in the 1940s, phrases like change and forward.
This is,
Crazy.
we've touched it before, but it's so important to remind people that this is the man who's going to be giving the State of the Union speech tonight. This is the man who talks about fundamental transformation, redistributing wealth, inequality. He doesn't make this stuff up. He's been indoctrinated. He's a true believer. He's an ideologue. He's a radical leftist. You agree with everything I'm saying?
Oh, I do. And when I was reading Frank Marshall Davis's stuff for the first time, I got copies of the old Chicago Star publication. A really good researcher found them for me in all places at the Tamman Archives at NYU, New York University. And I found there Davis, he's bashing what he called the tentacles of big business, bankers, big oil, the big boys, excess profits, corporate fat cats, millionaires, billionaires, the wealthy. He's attacking GOP tax cuts that spare the rich, that benefit the wealthy. He's calling for taxpayer-funded universal health care. He's attacking General Motors. He's attacking Winston Churchill. Frank Marshall Davis hated Winston Churchill.
Well, as Obama did.
Right. Yeah, when Obama first came in, and we read in the press that he sent the bust of Churchill back to the British embassy, and Americans are thinking, how could that possibly be? Who doesn't like Winston Churchill? Mm-hmm. Well, I could tell you the only people who didn't like Winston Churchill that I've ever come across was Communist Party USA, the Daily Worker, Stalin, Molotov, the Kremlin, and Frank Marshall Davis.
And, of course, those who were at the Third Reich.
Right.
Now, Dr. Paul Kengor, professor of political science at Grove City College, the book is The Communist Frank Marshall Davis, The Untold Story of Barack Obama's Mentor. It is a great book. I've already read it. I want to encourage people to look at it. But I thought it was very important, Doctor, to have you back so we could talk about this, given the context of this speech, because not a single commentator on television or radio will bring up any of this. So I want to thank you very, very much. I've got to run. I've got a hard break. But thank you for your time. You're absolutely terrific.
Well, thank you. You're terrific. Thanks for all you do.
God bless you, sir. Isn't that fascinating? Absolutely fascinating. And it's all true.
The only people who don't want to disclose the truth are people with something to hide.